My 30th birthday started with a cake and ended with my suitcases on the lawn. "Get out," Mom said, holding the door open. "We're done supporting you." Here's the real kicker. I'd been paying their mortgage for 5 years, and those credit cards they maxed out, I later learned they were all in my name. So what did I do? I froze every single account they had access to. Was that wrong? Stick around, because this story takes an even wilder turn when I discovered vacation photos they never told me about while claiming they couldn't afford groceries. What kind of parents would do something like this? The birthday betrayal? Let me tell you about the kind of parents who would betray their own child on what should have been a celebration. I woke up that morning feeling pretty good. A milestone, right? I stretched, checked my phone, dozens of birthday texts already, and smelled something amazing coming from the kitchen. Birthday pancakes, I thought. Mom always made those for special occasions. I spent extra time getting ready, thinking maybe we'd take a birthday photo or something. Stupid, looking back on it now. When I came downstairs, something felt off. Dad wouldn't make eye contact, just mumbled happy birthday while staring at his coffee. Mom was weirdly quiet too, flipping pancakes with this tense look on her face. The kitchen table had a little pile of presents and a chocolate cake, my favorite, sitting there with unlit candles. "Big day, huh?" I said, trying to break the weird silence. Mom just nodded and slid a plate of pancakes toward me. "Eat up." We sat there in this uncomfortable quiet. Dad kept checking his watch every few minutes like he had somewhere important to be. Mom kept starting sentences and then stopping. After breakfast, Mom pushed a birthday card across the table. This is from both of us. I opened it, expecting maybe a gift card or something. Instead, a folded piece of paper fell out. I unfolded it, thinking maybe it was a joke or a scavenger hunt or something. But no, it was a typed notice giving me until 5 p.m. that day to vacate the house. Their house. My childhood home. What is this? I looked up, my mouth literally hanging open. The cake still sitting there, candles unlit, presents untouched. Dad finally looked at me. "You're 30 years old now. It's time you found your own place." I laughed. I actually laughed because I thought it was some weird birthday prank. "Very funny, guys." "We're serious," Mom said, her voice weirdly formal. "We've supported you long enough. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. I felt like I'd been punched." "Supported me? Are you kidding? We need our space back," Dad interrupted. "You have until 5. They both got up and left the kitchen. Just left me sitting there with my eviction notice and an uncut birthday cake. I couldn't process what was happening. This had to be some kind of bizarre joke, but it wasn't. When I went upstairs, I found my mom had already pulled my suitcases out of storage and placed them on my bed. The message was crystal clear. I tried talking to them, tried reminding them that I had literally paid their mortgage for years, but they acted like I was speaking another language. Mom just kept saying, "This is for your own good. You need to be independent." Independent? I hadn't been dependent on them since I was 22. The worst part was packing my stuff with neighbors peering through windows as I packed. Small-town nosiness at its finest. Dad stood in the doorway with his arms crossed while I loaded my car. Mom stayed inside, occasionally peeking through the curtains like I might steal something on my way out. Like I'd steal from them after everything I'd done. That's when I noticed it. Sitting in the driveway next to my beaten-up Civic was a brand new SUV. Shiny blue, dealer tag still on it. I'd never seen it before. "New car?" I asked Dad, trying to sound casual while stuffing my life into trash bags because I didn't have enough suitcases. "Picked it up last week," he said, sounding proud. "Got a great financing deal." My heart sank. This was my money at work. Last month, he'd asked to use my laptop to check something online. I thought nothing of it. Now I wondered. "You have somewhere to go, right?" Dad asked, almost as an afterthought. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I did have somewhere, a friend's couch, but that wasn't the point. The point was I shouldn't need somewhere to go on my 30th birthday with zero notice. Well, happy birthday, he said awkwardly, like he was ending a business meeting. I sat in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and tried to understand how the people who were supposed to love me most in the world could do this. After everything I'd sacrificed for them, after paying their bills, fixing their roof, buying their groceries, all while I felt they were telling everyone what a burden I was. I drove away from my childhood home with my parents watching from the porch, actually looking relieved to see me go. The birthday cake never got eaten. The presents, I don't even know what they were, stayed wrapped on the table. My parents really did kick me out on my 30th birthday after years of me financially supporting them. And they had the nerve to act like they were the ones cutting off a freeloader. But here's what they didn't know as they waved goodbye to their personal ATM. This wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. Because what they'd done wasn't just cruel, it forced me to finally see the truth about our relationship. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee 5 years of financial exploitation that had been hiding in plain sight. The mortgage payments were just the beginning of what would turn out to be my complete financial nightmare. 5 years of financial support. Looking back, I can pinpoint exactly when I became my parents' personal ATM. It started small. Really small. Dad needed $50 for gas until payday. Mom wanted to borrow $200 for a dress for my cousin's wedding. No big deal, right? Parents help kids, kids help parents. That's normal. But they never paid it back. Not once. We raised you for 18 years, Mom would say whenever I mentioned being paid back. You think we kept track of how much we spent on you? And somehow, I was the bad guy for even bringing it up. Then 5 years ago, everything changed. Dad came home looking like someone had died. Mom was crying at the kitchen table. They'd both lost their jobs on the same day. The company they worked for, some insurance place, had shut down the entire regional office. No warning, no severance, nothing. We don't know what we're going to do, Mom sobbed. The mortgage is due next week. I still remember that sinking feeling in my stomach. I had just gotten my first decent paying job. Nothing fancy, just office work that finally covered more than just ramen noodles. I had $3,000 saved, my first real savings ever for a security deposit on my own apartment. I can help, I heard myself say, just until you guys get back on your feet. The relief on their faces. The way Dad hugged me. The way Mom kept saying I was their angel. I felt good. Important. Like a real adult helping my parents through a rough patch. That first month, I paid their mortgage $1,450, and their electric bill $237, and the water bill $89, and the groceries $400 something, and Dad's blood pressure medication $60 with insurance. Just for a few months, Dad promised. We're both applying for jobs every day. But a few months turned into 6. 6 months turned into a year. 1 year turned into 5. I never moved out. Couldn't afford to. Every time I saved a little, some new emergency came up. The roof leaked. The car died. The property taxes were due. I took a second job delivering pizzas at night. I picked up weekend shifts at a friend's landscaping business. I sold my gaming system, my nice watch, even my baseball card collection from when I was a kid. We hate that you're working so hard, Mom would say, while watching TV in the middle of the day. You should take a weekend off, Dad would suggest, before heading out to golf with his buddies. I missed my best friend's wedding because I couldn't afford the plane ticket to Texas. I dated a girl for 8 months and never took her anywhere nicer than Applebee's. I ignored a weird pain in my tooth for so long that I ended up needing a root canal that wiped out the $800 I'd managed to save over 3 months. The worst part? Every time I was just a little bit hesitant to pay for something, they made me feel like garbage. After all we've done for you was their favorite phrase. Or, we never thought you'd be the kind of son who'd let his parents become homeless. Or my personal favorite, we gave up so much to raise you and this is how you repay us? 2 years in, I started noticing weird charges on my credit card. A $400 dinner at a steakhouse I'd never been to. A $900 weekend at a casino 3 hours away. When I asked about it, Dad acted offended. You said we could use it for emergencies, he said. Like an expensive steak was an emergency. 3 years in, my credit score had plunged by hundreds of points. I found out they had opened 3 credit cards in my name. I only discovered it when I tried to consolidate my debt, and the bank pulled my credit report. We were going to pay those off, Mom said when I confronted them. We just needed a little breathing room. For years in, I realized something that made me feel sick. My parents weren't even trying anymore. I came home early one Thursday to find them hosting a wine and cheese party with their friends, everyone laughing on our back patio with bottles that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Meanwhile, I hadn't bought new clothes in years. I was eating ramen 3 nights a week to save money, just like in college, except I was 29 with a full-time job and a part-time job. When I tried bringing up a budget, suggesting maybe we cut back on some things, they acted like I was attacking them. "We're not children," Dad snapped. "Don't lecture us about money." "You don't understand what it's like to be our age," Mom added. "We've worked hard our whole lives. We deserve a few comforts." I sat down one night and added it all up. Just out of curiosity, all told, I had poured more than $150,000 into their household over 5 years. And that wasn't counting the hit to my credit score or the interest I was paying on those cards they'd maxed out. Over $150,000. That's what I gave them. That's what they took from me. That's what they felt entitled to. And the thanks I got? A typed eviction notice on my 30th birthday, telling me to get out of their house because they were done supporting me. But I still didn't fully grasp how calculated it all had been. Not until I found those vacation photos they never told me about. That's when everything finally clicked into place. The moment of realization. I discovered their betrayal completely by accident, and it changed everything. It was 3 weeks before my birthday. I was using Mom's iPad to look up a recipe because my phone had died. She'd left Facebook open, and I wasn't snooping, I swear. But then I saw it. A notification. "Your cruise memories from 1 year ago." Wait, what cruise? I hesitated, my finger hovering above the screen. Should I even look? Did I really want to know? I tapped on the notification, and there they were. My parents, toasting with fancy cocktails on the deck of a massive ship. My mom in a sundress I'd never seen, wearing designer sunglasses with the price tags still dangling from them. My dad grinning in a Hawaiian shirt, posing next to some towel animal a crew member had made. The same parents who, exactly 1 year ago, had told me they couldn't contribute to groceries that month because things were tight. The same month I'd eaten ramen for dinner 12 times because after paying their bills, I couldn't afford much else. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might throw up. I scrolled through the album, photo after photo. Them at a fancy dinner. Mom getting a massage on the deck. Dad at the casino. A shore excursion to swim with dolphins. The dates on the photos matched exactly with when they told me they were visiting Aunt Linda for a week. Aunt Linda, who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and supposedly needed help after her hip surgery. I felt physically sick, like the floor was tilting under me. Because it wasn't just the lying, it was how happy they looked. How carefree. While I was working 2 jobs, skipping meals, and wearing shoes with holes in them because I couldn't afford new ones. That's when I started digging. I'm not proud of it, but I went through Mom's email history right there on her iPad. I found the receipt for the cruise in her email, $3,899 for a balcony cabin. I found receipts for the new clothes they had bought for the trip, $753. I found the shore excursion package, $450, over $5,000. $5,000 they'd spent while telling me they couldn't afford groceries. When they got home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen. The iPad sat on the table between us, open to the cruise photos. "Want to tell me about your trip to see Aunt Linda?" I asked. The look on their faces, like kids caught stealing cookies. But it lasted only a second before Mom's expression hardened. "We didn't think you needed to know," she said, like I'd asked about some minor detail. "You told me you couldn't afford groceries that month," I said. My voice sounded strange, even to me. "Too calm." Dad shrugged. "We deserved a break from all the stress." "What stress?" I asked. "You don't work. You don't pay bills. What exactly stresses you out? Don't take that tone with us, Mom snapped. After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me? I was shouting now. I pay for everything. Everything. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years because I'm paying for your golf membership and wine club. We raised you, Dad said, like that was the final word on the matter. You owe us. That's what family does. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't steal. Steal? Mom looked offended. How dare you? That's when I lost it. Really lost it. I pulled out the credit card statements I'd printed, the cards they'd opened in my name. I showed them the total, $18,000. I told them that was identity theft. They didn't even look ashamed. You should be grateful we raised you, Mom said. Some kids get abandoned. Some kids get abused. You had a roof over your head and food on the table. And now I'm providing your roof and your food, I shouted, for 5 years. You're being dramatic, Dad said, waving his hand dismissively. It's what family does. I stormed out of the house that night, slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot because I needed space to think. The next morning, I called in sick to work and did something I should have done years earlier. I went to the bank. I asked to see all my statements from the past 5 years. All of them. And the banker looked at me with this weird expression, like she was surprised I didn't know. You want all the transfer records too? She asked. What transfers? She pulled them up on her screen. Every month for the past 3 years, $200 had been transferred from my checking account to a savings account I didn't recognize. This isn't my account, I said, pointing at the destination account number. Her expression changed. She typed something, then turned the screen toward me. This is the account information. It was a joint savings account in my parents' names. But the kicker? The account title was Vacation Fund. 3 years. $200 a month. $7,200 of my money transferred without my knowledge specifically for their vacations. That was the moment. The exact moment when everything crystallized for me. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't temporary help that got out of hand. It was calculated. Deliberate. They had been systematically bleeding me dry while living better than I was. They had been stealing from me while watching me struggle, and they felt entitled to do it. I walked out of that bank a different person. The guilt was gone. The confusion was gone. For the first time in 5 years, I saw my parents for who they really were, financial abusers who had no intention of ever changing. As I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused because I suddenly remembered something important, something they had completely forgotten about. Planning the financial revenge. That morning, I remembered the one advantage I still had, the keys to their financial kingdom. After years of being their personal ATM, I realized I still had one thing they didn't know about, access to everything. When I set up my parents' online banking 3 years ago, I created all their passwords. Dad couldn't be bothered to learn all that computer stuff, and Mom kept forgetting which special characters she used. So I made them simple accounts with passwords they could remember. The kind of obvious ones like their anniversary plus my dad's lucky number. What they didn't realize, I never removed myself as an authorized user on any of their accounts. Not the checking account I'd set up automatic transfers to. Not the credit cards I'd help them activate. Not even their mortgage portal where they made online payments with my money. I sat in my car outside the bank that day, staring at my phone's banking app. With a few taps, I could see everything. Their checking account balance, their savings, their credit card statements, everything. For about 20 minutes, I just sat there. Was I really going to do this? Cut them off completely? It felt wrong. Like I was crossing some invisible line children aren't supposed to cross with their parents. They raised me. They were family. But they'd also stolen from me. Lied to me. Used me. I drove to a coffee shop and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, plain black coffee. I couldn't shake the habit of pinching pennies even though I wasn't paying for my parents' expenses at that moment. I spread out all the bank statements on the table and spent hours color-coding every transfer, every suspicious charge, every account. When I finished, those papers looked like a crime scene, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The next day, I called a financial advisor. I didn't have much money, but I needed professional advice. What were my options? Could I legally cut them off? Would I get in trouble for accessing their accounts, even though I was an authorized user? Her eyes widened as I explained my situation, and then she said, "This is financial abuse. Not this is a family disagreement or this is a misunderstanding." She called it what it was, abuse. She helped me understand my rights. As an authorized user who had legally been given access, I could remove myself from the accounts. I could freeze credit cards where I was the primary cardholder. I could stop automatic payments from my accounts to theirs. What I couldn't legally do was take their money or access accounts where I wasn't authorized. That was fine. I didn't want their money. I just wanted them to stop taking mine. Then came the bombshell. While reviewing my credit report, the advisor found a new inquiry, just 3 days old. Someone had applied for a home equity loan using my information and my parents' address. "Did you apply for this?" she asked. I hadn't. My stomach dropped. They were planning another fraud, after everything. That's when my hesitation disappeared. This wasn't just about the past anymore. They were actively planning to steal more from me even after kicking me out. I spent the next week creating a detailed plan. I made spreadsheets of every account, every password, every automatic payment. I figured out which actions to take first to prevent them from moving money around. Once they realized what was happening, I also documented everything for legal purposes. Downloaded statements, saved emails, took screenshots of transfers I hadn't authorized, made copies of the credit card applications they'd filled out in my name. Timing was crucial. I needed to cut everything off at once. If I froze one card but not the others, they'd just shift their spending. If I blocked transfers but left the credit cards active, they'd max those out. I knew exactly what would happen when I pulled the trigger. Their entire financial house of cards would collapse. The automatic payments for their utilities would fail. Their credit cards would be declined. Their ability to transfer money from my accounts would vanish. They'd been living beyond their means for years, floating on my income and credit. Without access to my money, they'd have to face reality. They'd have to get jobs, sell their new car, cancel their golf membership and wine club. Part of me felt terrible. These were my parents. But another part, the part that had been working 60-hour weeks while they went on cruises, felt something else. Not quite satisfaction. Not quite relief. Maybe just justice. The plan was surprisingly simple in the end. I was still the primary account holder on 2 of their credit cards, the ones they'd opened using my information. I was an authorized user on their checking account. I controlled the online login information for basically all their financial accounts. Legally, I could shut it all down. And morally, after finding out about the home equity loan attempt, I felt completely justified. I picked a date, the day after my 30th birthday. Somehow that felt appropriate. They thought kicking me out on my birthday was the end of the story. They thought I'd go cry in a corner somewhere while continuing to pay their bills. They had no idea I was about to turn the tables. I had everything ready. The phone numbers to call, the accounts to freeze, the passwords to change, the automated payments to cancel. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was ready to take back control of my financial life, even if it meant losing my family in the process. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and made the first call, freezing the accounts. My hands were shaking. I dialed the first number, feeling like I was stepping off a cliff with no idea how far I'd fall. Everything would change. Customer service, how can I help you today? The voice on the other end sounded cheerful, oblivious to what I was about to do. I need to freeze an account, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I believe there's been fraudulent activity. One by one, I made the calls, each freeze feeling both criminal and redemptive. The credit cards they'd opened in my name without permission were first. I gave my information, name, address, social security number, all the things my parents knew by heart and had used against me. I'm placing a freeze on the account right now, the representative said after I explained. No further charges will be authorized. Just like that, one account down, it felt both terrible and wonderful at the same time, like removing a splinter that had been festering for years. With each call, the guilt lessened and the resolve strengthened. What kind of son does this to his parents? But also, what kind of parents do this to their son? The checking accounts were harder. I had to explain why I was removing myself as an authorized user on their account and canceling all automatic transfers from my accounts to theirs. This will stop all scheduled payments, the bank representative warned, including any automatic bills. I understand. And I did. I understood exactly what would happen when their mortgage payment bounced, when their utilities got cut off, when their credit cards were declined at restaurants. The fourth call was to my own bank. I needed to place alerts on my accounts and change all my passwords. The woman who helped me seemed concerned enough to transfer me to a manager. Her name was Diane, and she listened quietly as I explained everything. The 5 years of paying their bills, the credit cards they'd opened without my consent, the secret transfers, the cruise they'd taken with my money. More often than you'd think, she said when I finished. But usually it's elderly parents being taken advantage of by adult children. Rarely does it go the other way. She helped me place fraud alerts on my credit report and set up notifications for any attempts to access my accounts. She even suggested filing a police report about the fraudulent credit cards. I couldn't go that far. Not yet. They were still my parents despite everything. You're doing the right thing, Diane said before we hung up. Financial abuse is still abuse. By noon, I had made all the calls, changed all the passwords, removed myself from all shared accounts, frozen all the credit cards I was responsible for, canceled all automatic transfers, placed fraud alerts on my credit reports. It felt both exhausting and exhilarating. For the first time in 5 years, my money was just my money. My credit was just my credit. I sat back on my friend's couch and stared at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, people were going about their normal Tuesday, walking dogs, getting lunch, living lives that hadn't just imploded. The next part was just waiting for them to discover what I'd done, waiting for the moment they tried to use a credit card and found it declined, waiting for them to check their bank account and see that no money had magically appeared from mine, waiting for them to realize their free ride was over. I imagined them at a restaurant, trying to pay for lunch, the waiter returning with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, your card was declined." The confusion on their faces, the embarrassment, the slow realization that something was very wrong. Or maybe they'd be at the grocery store. Cart full of food, cashier scanning everything, the card terminal flashing red. "Do you have another form of payment?" I kept checking my phone, expecting it to ring any minute. But hours passed in silence. I tried to eat something, but couldn't. My stomach was in knots. What I'd done felt both perfectly justified and absolutely terrible. By evening, I was pacing around my friend's living room. The waiting was worse than making the calls. Had I done enough? Had I missed something? Would they find some other way to access my money? I checked all my accounts one more time. Everything looked secure. I had successfully frozen every account they had access to. Credit cards, checking accounts, online payment services, everything. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Mom. And just like that, I knew the storm was about to hit. They had discovered they were cut off. They had found out their financial house of cards had collapsed. And they were not going to take it quietly. I took a deep breath and answered the call. Hello? I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I had to silence my phone during a job interview later that afternoon, and when I checked it afterward, I discovered I'd missed something significant. The parental meltdown. Turning my phone back on after the interview, I was met with an avalanche of notifications. My parents had discovered they were financially cut off. My voicemail was completely full, and texts were still coming in. The progression from confusion to rage happened in real time across dozens of messages. The first voicemail captured Mom's bewildered tone. "Honey, something weird is happening with all our cards. Call me back right away. The store manager is being very rude about it." 10 minutes later, irritation had replaced confusion. "The bank says there's some kind of freeze on the accounts. You need to call them and fix this. We're sitting in the Walmart parking lot with $200 worth of groceries we can't pay for. By the third message, suspicion had taken root. Did you do something to our accounts? Call me immediately. I sat in my car, listening to message after message. Dad started out business like, son, we seem to be having an issue with all our banking. Give us a call when you get this. But the facade cracked quickly. What the hell do you think you're doing? Fix this right now. They'd weaponized guilt like this my entire life. Mom leveraged health concerns. My blood pressure medication was in that grocery order. If something happens to me because of this, it's on your conscience. Dad threatened legal action. This is illegal what you're doing. I've called our lawyer. You can't just cut off elderly parents. Elderly? They were in their early 50s. Mom tried a softer approach. Honey, if this is about your birthday, we're sorry. We just thought it was time for you to be independent. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Then Dad, full on yelling, you ungrateful little shit. After everything we've done for you. You're going to regret this. You hear me? You're going to pay for what you've done to your mother. The final voicemail was Mom again, her voice eerily sweet, like she was talking to a small child. Sweetheart, there's been a big misunderstanding. Dad and I need you to come home so we can talk about this like adults. We love you so much. I didn't call back right away. I needed time to prepare, and I had a second interview that afternoon I couldn't miss. I couldn't afford to, especially now. Around 4 p.m., my phone rang again. Dad. I let it go to voicemail, but then he called again. And again. On the fourth call, I answered, You've got some explaining to do, he said immediately, no greeting. So do you? I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. We can't access any of our accounts. None of our cards are working. What did you do? I froze the accounts I'm responsible for and removed unauthorized access to my finances. There was a pause. I could practically hear him processing this, trying to find a way to twist it. Those are our family accounts, he said finally. No, they're accounts in my name that you've been using without permission. The credit cards you opened using my social security number? That's fraud, Dad. Another pause, longer this time. Then his voice changed, became almost friendly. Look, let's not get carried away with legal terms. We're a family. Families share resources. Did you share with me when you went on that cruise last year? The one you paid for with my money while telling me you couldn't afford groceries? That's different. We deserve a break. I know. You keep saying that. His tone shifted again, this time to something I'd never heard before. Pleading. Son, you don't understand. We need those accounts. The mortgage is due next week. The power company already called about the automatic payment failing. I know, I said. I canceled it. That's when he exploded. Started shouting about how I was killing my mother, how she was so upset she might have a heart attack, how I'd regret the day I turned against my own family. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Mom called. She was crying again, but it sounded different, calculated. The bank says you did this on purpose, she sobbed. How could you do this to us? We're your parents. The same way you could kick me out on my birthday after I paid your bills for 5 years. That was different. We were helping you grow up. By taking my money? By opening credit cards in my name? By lying about where you were going and what you were spending. I think I'm having a heart attack, she said suddenly. My arm hurts. That's a sign, right? Oh God, I can't breathe. Classic mom move, which deflated as soon as I asked her to call 911. If you're having a heart attack, hang up and call 911, I said flatly. The symptoms vanished immediately. How dare you? I raised you better than this. Over the next 3 days, they tried everything. Dad threatened to disown me. Mom claimed she might harm herself if I didn't fix this right away. Dad said they'd tell everyone what a terrible son I was. Mom promised they'd change, that things would be different if I just gave them one more chance. Dad left a voicemail saying my childhood. Dog was sick and needed expensive medicine. A lie. The dog had died 2 years earlier. Mom texted saying she'd lost her wedding ring and needed money to replace it before Dad noticed. Every manipulation tactic, every guilt trip, every threat they'd ever used on me came rushing out in a 3-day explosion of increasingly desperate messages. And then, when they realized I wasn't budging, something shifted. They changed tactics completely. If they couldn't manipulate me directly, they'd try another approach, turning our community against me. Small town, big drama. The rumors hit our small town like wildfire, spreading from the church potluck to the gas station in less than 48 hours. I wasn't at Sunday's church gathering, but my friend Melissa texted me updates in real time. Your mom is surrounded by the prayer circle ladies, dabbing her eyes with tissues and telling everyone you abandoned them without warning. She's really selling it. By Monday morning, my old weekend boss Hank called to check if I was okay. Heard you had some kind of breakdown and froze your parents' accounts during a mental episode. Thanks, Dad, for that creative spin. My first public confrontation happened at Wilson's gas station while I was filling up my car. Mrs. Wilson marched out from behind the counter, arms crossed, looking at me like I'd kicked her cat. Your poor mother called me crying yesterday, she said without bothering with hello. Said you'd left them destitute. That true? I stood there, gas nozzle in hand, weighing how much to share. Not exactly, I managed. She raised an eyebrow. Diane at the bank says there's more to this story than your folks are telling. I'd forgotten that Mrs. Wilson and Diane played bridge together every Thursday. Small towns, your neighbor's hairdresser is your banker's bridge partner and your ex-girlfriend's cousin's roommate. A lot more, I admitted. The first real ally emerged where I least expected. I ran into my high school math teacher, Mr. Peterson, in the frozen food aisle at the grocery store. Instead of avoiding me like Mom's book club friends had just done, he stopped his cart. Rough situation with your parents, he said, adjusting his glasses. I nodded, bracing for judgment. For what it's worth, he continued, I always thought it was strange how they'd drop you off at those weekend math competitions in their new car, then complain they couldn't afford the $10 registration fee. I blinked at him, surprised. You remember that? I remember paying it myself, he said. And I remember you working at the movie theater during weeknights to pay for college application fees while your dad bragged about his golf game at the barbershop. That conversation changed everything. It was the first hint that not everyone was buying my parents' version of events. The next day, the cashier at the pharmacy, Tammy, who'd gone to high school with me, leaned across the counter after ringing up my toothpaste. Is it true you worked 2 jobs while paying your parents' mortgage? She asked in a low voice. Word was spreading, but the version was changing. Who told you that? I asked. My boyfriend's sister works at the pizza place you delivered for. Said you were always exhausted because you were supporting your parents. By the end of the week, the town had split into 2 camps. There were the people who believed my parents, mostly their church friends and my dad's golf buddies, who gave me cold stares at the post office. And then there were the people who'd actually seen me working those double shifts, who noticed the contrast between my worn-out clothes and my parents' new purchases. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant became an unexpected defender when I ran into her at the laundromat. Your mother came into restaurant yesterday, she said without preamble. Told me sad story about ungrateful son. Asked for free lunch because no money. She snorted. I said no. I remember you working Christmas Eve when they went to resort. I didn't even know Mrs. Chen had noticed that. You good boy, she continued, measuring detergent. Work hard. They take. Not right. Little by little, conversations were happening all over town. At the barbershop, where they remembered my dad complaining about me not giving them enough money while he got premium haircuts. At the nail salon, where they remembered my mom getting weekly manicures while telling everyone I was struggling to find direction. The breaking point came when my cousin Jake called me. Dude, your parents just asked my parents for money, he said. Said you left them destitute and they needed help with bills. What did your parents say? I asked, cringing. Dad told them to get jobs. Jake laughed. Said it was about time. Even my aunt and uncle, who had always been close with my parents, weren't buying the victim story anymore. The most satisfying moment came when Pastor Mike approached me at the coffee shop. He'd been one of the first people to hear my parents' version, but now he sat down across from me with a thoughtful expression. "I've been hearing a lot of different accounts about your situation," he said carefully, "and I've noticed your parents' story keeps changing." I nodded, but didn't elaborate. "They told the church building committee they needed emergency funds because you stole their retirement," he continued. "But Diane at the bank mentioned you'd been paying their mortgage for years." 5 years, I confirmed. He nodded slowly. "That changes things." 2 weeks after I'd frozen the accounts, I walked into the diner for breakfast and nobody stared. Nobody whispered. The waitress, who'd initially given me the cold shoulder, brought me coffee with a smile and "good to see you." The tide had turned. The truth had filtered through the town's gossip network, emerging stronger on the other side. People had put together their own observations with bits and pieces of the real story, creating a more accurate picture than the one my parents had tried to paint. But as public opinion shifted in my favor, my father was preparing his next move. The envelope that arrived in my mailbox the following day proved he wasn't finished fighting, not by a long shot. Legal threats and reality. The next day, I found a cream-colored envelope in my mailbox that changed everything. My father's favorite phrase became, "We'll sue you for everything you've got," ironic since everything they had was actually mine. The envelope looked important. Official letterhead, one of those little gold seals at the bottom, and "official legal notice" stretched across the top in bold letters. My heart raced as I pulled it from the mailbox, until I Googled the sender's name and discovered he wasn't a lawyer at all. The return address said, "Law Offices of William P. Thornton." I opened it right there on the sidewalk, hands shaking slightly. "Dear Mr. Johnson," it began. "This letter serves as formal notice that Bernard and Margaret Johnson intend to pursue legal action against you for financial abandonment, elder abuse, and unlawful account access. If you do not restore full access to all financial accounts within 72 hours of receipt of this notice." Elder abuse, they claimed, my parents in their 50s. The letter went on for 3 pages, using phrases like substantial legal penalties and criminal charges may be pursued. It ended with a phone number to call to avoid costly litigation. I called the number on the letterhead. "Hello?" A woman answered, sounding like she was in a kitchen. I could hear a TV in the background. "Is this the law office of William Thornton?" I asked. "Who?" "Oh, you mean Billy." "No, this is his mother's house. He's not a lawyer yet, still in his first year of law school. Who's calling?" I hung up. My parents had gotten a first-year law student to write a fake legal threat, probably the son of someone from their church. The relief lasted about 10 minutes before the panic set in again. Just because this letter was fake didn't mean they couldn't get a real lawyer. What if I had broken some law I didn't know about? I called a real attorney the next day. Her name was Vanessa Torres, and her office was in the next town over. The consultation fee was $200, money I could barely afford, but I was too scared not to spend it. Her office was small but professional. No fake gold seals anywhere. She read the letter, looked up at me, then read it again. "This is not from a real attorney," she said finally. "I know." I called the number. "Smart." She nodded. I told her everything. The 5 years of paying their bills, the credit cards they'd opened in my name, the secret transfers from my account, the fraud, the lies, the manipulation. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. She told me flat out, "You owe them nothing, legally or morally. What they did with those credit cards, that's fraud. That's a crime. You could press charges if you wanted to." "I don't want to press charges," I said quickly. "I just want to know if they can force me to give them money." "They cannot," she said firmly. "No court would order an adult child to support capable parents. That's not how our legal system works." She explained that I had every right to freeze accounts where I was the primary cardholder. I had every right to remove myself as an authorized user on their accounts. I had every right to cancel automatic transfers from my accounts to theirs. "What about the mortgage?" I asked. I've been paying it for years. Can they claim I have to keep paying it? No, she said. Unless you co-signed the mortgage, did you? I hadn't. The house was in their names only. Then you have no legal obligation to pay their mortgage. Period. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I hadn't broken any laws. I wasn't going to be sued. I wasn't going to be forced to keep supporting them. Vanessa offered to write a response to the fake legal letter. For another $200. She'd make it clear that any further legal threats would be met with counteractions, including potential fraud charges for the credit cards opened in my name. I agreed. It was worth another $200 to end this, once and for all. 3 days later, my parents received a real legal letter from a real attorney. I don't know exactly what it said, but I do know it worked. The threats stopped immediately. No more calls about suing me. No more texts about lawyers. Instead, something unexpected happened. My dad called, his voice different than I'd ever heard it. No anger, no threats, just quiet desperation. The bank says they're starting foreclosure, he said. We need help. I know, I said. You should probably look for jobs. There was a long silence. Is there any way you'd reconsider? Maybe just until we get back on our feet? It was the same line they'd used 5 years ago. The same promise that had cost me $150,000 and years of my life. No, I said. I don't think I will. They couldn't sue me. They couldn't force me to support them. They had no legal claim to my money or my credit. All they had were the consequences of their own choices finally catching up to them. With the legal threats neutralized, my parents tried a different approach, turning my own family against me. And that's when I discovered desperate scrambles for new financial support revealed who in my family had known the truth all along. I have 3 siblings, my older brother James and my younger sisters Tara and Emma. We'd never been super close. James moved away for college when I was 14 and barely came back, while my sisters were still finding their way through early adulthood. But family is family, right? At least that's what I thought until my parents started calling them one by one. James called me first, his voice tight with that big brother authority he'd perfected since we were kids. Mom's crying her eyes out. What the hell did you do? I tried explaining the 5 years of paying their bills, the credit cards opened in my name, the secret transfers, the lies. He cut me off halfway through. There are parents, he said, like that explained everything. You don't just cut them off. They cut me off, I reminded him. Kicked me out on my birthday, remember? They said you've been mooching off them for years and finally refused to get a job. I laughed. Actually laughed, which only made him angrier. James, I've been working 2 jobs for 5 years. Where do you think their mortgage payments were coming from? I don't believe you, he said flatly, and hung up. Tara's approach was different, all sympathy and concern. We're really worried about you, she said. Dad thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. They said you're making up all these stories about paying their bills. I have bank statements, I said. 5 years of bank statements showing transfers to their accounts. But why would you pay their mortgage? That doesn't make sense. I realized then that they really didn't know. My parents had kept their financial exploitation secret even from my siblings. Or had they? Emma's call was the most revealing. At 22, she was the youngest, still living at home while attending community college. Her voice was hushed, like she was hiding somewhere in the house. Is it true? She asked. Have you really been paying for everything? Yes, I said. For years. I thought so, she finally said. I found some bank statements in the trash once. Dad's name, but your account number. I asked about it, and they said you were just helping out temporarily while they were between jobs. That was 3 years ago, Emma. I know. Her voice got even quieter. They're freaking out. Dad's throwing stuff. Mom keeps locking herself in the bathroom to cry. They made me call all these relatives asking for money. That explained the sudden flood of texts from cousins and aunts I barely spoke to, all asking what was going on with my parents. Then something unexpected happened. My mom's sister, Aunt Patty, who I hadn't seen in at least a decade due to some mysterious family rift, sent me a private message on Facebook. call me," it said. "I've been where you are." Her first words were, "So they finally did it to you too." "What do you mean?" I asked. "The financial drain, the guilt trips, the entitlement. They did the exact same thing to me 20 years ago." She told me how my parents had moved in with her temporarily after they lost their apartment before I was born. How they never contributed to bills, but always had money for new clothes and dinners out. How they borrowed her car for a weekend trip and returned it with an empty tank and a dent they never mentioned. How they'd opened a credit card in her name and maxed it out buying Christmas presents that made them look generous to the rest of the family. When I finally kicked them out, they told everyone I was mentally unstable and had turned against the family for no reason, she said. Sound familiar? It was like hearing my own story played back to me. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. "Would you have believed me? They're your parents. They controlled the narrative." She was right. I wouldn't have believed her. Just like James didn't believe me now. The final blow came at a family dinner I wasn't invited to. Emma told me about it later. My parents had gathered all the siblings, cousins, and local relatives to discuss the situation. They'd shown up looking appropriately distressed, told their version of events, and asked for both emotional and financial support. Then James, my skeptical older brother, did something unexpected. He asked to see their bank statements. He wanted proof that I'd been lying about supporting them. My parents refused. Things got heated. James insisted. He said either they showed everyone the bank records or he'd assume I was telling the truth, Emma told me. Dad stormed out. Mom started crying. No bank statements were shown that night, but seeds of doubt were planted. The family split down the middle. Some relatives cut me off completely, while others reached out cautiously once they saw my dad rifling through James's wallet at a subsequent gathering. James called me a week later. "I believe you now," he said simply. "They tried to borrow money from me yesterday using my own credit card." One by one, my siblings came around as they witnessed our parents' increasingly desperate attempts to find a new financial host. But those relationships were changed forever. Not just with our parents, but with each other. Why hadn't any of them noticed what was happening to me? Why hadn't I trusted them enough to tell them? The grief of those lost connections was real. Some family members I'd never speak to again. Others would take years to rebuild trust with. But as painful as that family fallout was, I was about to discover something I never expected, a sense of freedom I hadn't felt since before my parents lost their jobs 5 years ago. Unexpected freedom. The first night sleeping in my car was a wake-up call. Parked behind a Walmart, I curled up in my backseat with a hoodie as a pillow and my gym membership card as my only comfort. At least I could shower somewhere. 3 nights like that, plus 2 weeks on friends' couches, and I started wondering if financial freedom was worth this level of instability. Then my first post-parents paycheck hit my account. I stared at the balance, confused. After paying my own bills, just my bills, I actually had money left over. Not much, but still. For 5 years, every penny I earned had vanished into the black hole of my parents' expenses. Now, suddenly, I had savings. The concept seemed foreign. I bought myself a decent meal that night. Not fancy, just a burger that wasn't from the dollar menu. It lasted longer than the ramen packets I'd been surviving on in more ways than one. With a notebook and a calculator, I made my first real adult budget. Without my parents' mortgage, utilities, golf membership, wine club, endless restaurant meals, and shopping sprees, I could actually afford a decent apartment of my own. A small one, sure, but mine. 2 months after being kicked out, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in the next town over. Nothing fancy, beige walls, beige carpet, beige everything, but when that key landed in my palm, it felt like life itself returning to me. No one asking for money the minute my paycheck hit. No one making me feel guilty for buying new work shoes when my old ones had holes. Just peace. I started fixing my credit, called the companies, explained the situation, filed fraud reports on the cards I hadn't authorized. It was tedious, frustrating work, but every small victory felt huge. 6 months in, my credit score had climbed nearly 100 points. Not great yet, but moving in the right direction. The financial freedom was amazing, but the emotional freedom, that was life-changing. I bought a new shirt without hearing my mom's voice in my head, asking if I really needed it. I ordered pizza on a Friday night without calculating how many hours I'd need to work to cover it. I slept through the night without waking up panicking about bills. I started saving for things I wanted. Actual goals, not emergencies. A better car, a vacation, maybe someday a down payment on a small house. Things that had seemed impossible just months earlier were now realistic plans. The biggest change came 9 months after freezing the accounts. With my improved credit and steady savings, I could finally do what I'd wanted to do for years, move to Portland. I'd always loved it there, but supporting my parents had made relocating impossible. Now, nothing was holding me back. I found a job at a marketing firm, packed my few belongings into my car, and left the small town I'd been stuck in for years. The Portland rain on my windshield as I crossed the city limits felt like a baptism, washing away 5 years of financial servitude. My apartment in Portland was even smaller than my previous one, but I didn't care. I was 3 hours away from my parents and their drama. I made new friends who knew nothing about my family history. I dated without the embarrassment of living with my parents at 30 or having to explain why I couldn't afford dinner and a movie in the same night. I went to therapy, something I'd never been able to afford before. Talking through the years of financial abuse helped me recognize patterns I was still carrying. The fear of checking my bank account, the guilt about spending money on myself, the tendency to lend money to friends even when I couldn't afford it. The most surprising realization? How many other relationships in my life had become toxic because I'd normalized financial exploitation. The friend who always forgot his wallet, the ex-girlfriend who expected me to pay for everything, the coworker who never paid me back for lunch. I started setting boundaries with everyone, not just my parents. A year and a half after being kicked out, I took my first real vacation in over 6 years. Nothing extravagant, a long weekend in Seattle, but I'll never forget sitting at that waterfront restaurant, watching the sunset, and realizing I didn't feel guilty about spending money on the experience. I wasn't mentally calculating how many shifts I'd need to pick up to cover my parents' cable bill. I was just present, happy. The fear of cutting ties with family had kept me trapped for years. The reality of life without that toxic connection turned out to be the opposite of what I'd feared. Instead of struggling, I thrived. Instead of loneliness, I found authentic relationships. Instead of guilt, I found self-worth. Don't get me wrong, there's still pain there. Still moments when I see a father and son fishing together or a family celebrating a birthday and feel that twinge of loss. But then I remember what those relationships really cost me, and I know I made the right choice. Yet sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn when doubts creep in, I still wonder if there might have been another way. They're my parents after all. Did I go too far? Was I wrong? That nagging question follows me on quiet nights when memories surface. The weight of my decisions sits heavy sometimes. Was I wrong to cut them off so completely? I still remember birthdays when Mom would decorate the entire house, Dad teaching me to throw a baseball in the backyard, family movie nights with popcorn fights and laughter. Those good memories exist alongside the exploitation. They're real too, and sometimes they make me question everything. Society has pretty clear expectations about family obligations. Parents take care of kids, then kids take care of parents when they get older. Every heartwarming commercial showing adult children helping their elderly parents sends that twist of guilt through my stomach. Am I the villain in this story? My friend Marco certainly thinks so. They're your blood, he says whenever the topic comes up. You only get one set of parents. He takes care of his mom, even though she drives him crazy. Sends her money every month, calls her every Sunday. He can't understand why I couldn't just set better boundaries instead of freezing the accounts. Then there's my coworker Jen, who thinks I didn't go far enough. You should have pressed charges, she says flatly. What they did was criminal. Her parents stole her identity when she was in college, and 20 years later, she's still dealing with the credit fallout. She hasn't spoken to them since she was 19 and doesn't regret it for a second. I fall somewhere in the middle. Some days I'm sure I did the right thing. Other days I wonder if I should have tried harder to fix things instead of cutting them off completely. The guilt hits hardest during holidays. Last Christmas, I sat in my apartment alone, eating takeout and watching movies, suddenly remembering how my mom used to make incredible cinnamon rolls every Christmas morning. For a few minutes, I almost called her. Then I remembered those cruise photos. The image of them toasting with fancy cocktails on deck while I ate ramen for the 12th time that month. The bank manager's face when she showed me the vacation fund transfers they'd set up from my account without my knowledge. The guilt fades, replaced by a cold anger that still surprises me. My therapist helped me see things more clearly. Honor your parents doesn't mean tolerating abuse, she said during one particularly difficult session. You're grieving not just the relationship you lost, but the relationship you should have had. She explained that cutting off contact was a healthy response to years of exploitation. That continuing to give them money would have been enabling their behavior, not helping them. The financial abuse support group I joined online showed me I wasn't alone. During one meeting, a woman shared how her parents had convinced her that paying their mortgage was normal, while they secretly rented out their second property for income they never mentioned. In my culture, saying no to parents is unthinkable, she explained, so they knew I couldn't refuse. Her story hit me hard because I recognized that same manipulation, the weaponization of family obligation to extract financial support. I've spent countless hours thinking about what family really means, what obligations we truly have to the people who raised us. Is it the same for everyone? Does the quality of parenting affect the level of obligation? If your parents were abusive, do you still owe them care in their old age? Sometimes I try to imagine a middle path I could have taken. Maybe cutting them off financially, but keeping in touch. Setting strict boundaries instead of complete separation. Helping them find jobs instead of just freezing everything all at once. But then I remember how they responded when I confronted them about the cruise. How they felt entitled to my money. How they kicked me out on my birthday after years of financial support. How they lied to everyone about what happened. How they tried to manipulate my siblings against me. How they threatened legal action. How they never once, not once, apologized or acknowledged what they'd done. And I realized there probably wasn't a middle path. They would have found ways around any boundary I set. The freezing of accounts wasn't just about stopping the financial bleeding. It was about finally standing up for myself after years of being taken advantage of. Was my method dramatic? Probably. Could I have handled it more gracefully? Maybe. But after 5 years of exploitation, after discovering fraud in my name, after realizing they were actively planning to take out more loans using my information, a gentle approach wouldn't have worked. Sometimes protecting yourself has to be your first priority, even when it means hurting people you love. Even when those people are your parents. Even when society tells you that's wrong. I didn't freeze their accounts out of revenge. I did it because it was the only way to break free from a cycle of exploitation that had defined our relationship for years. I did it because I deserved financial security and peace of mind. The hardest lessons often come from unexpected sources. And sometimes those painful lessons are the ones that ultimately set us free. Life's most profound teachers aren't always the ones we expect. My parents taught me about boundaries in the most painful way possible, but I wouldn't change what I did. 2 years later, I'm thriving in ways I never imagined. My credit score climbs monthly. I sleep through the night. I buy coffee without mentally calculating how many hours I need to work to pay for it. Would you have done the same thing in my shoes? Tell me one boundary you'd set if you were facing financial abuse from family. If you've ever woken up to toxic family dynamics, hit subscribe. This channel explores real stories like this every week. Because sometimes setting boundaries isn't just necessary, it's the most powerful act of self-love you can choose.